Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird, here to do a very special comic book review, the first of a series of Nightmare on Elm Street comic book reviews, and in this episode, I'm going to be reviewing both the Freddy's Dead innovation adaptation of the movie from back in 1991, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check right now. 1991 indeed. All right. So that's the first thing I'm going to be going through. And then the second thing I'm going to be going through is A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Beginning. And this was a 2 of 3 issue series that actually came out post Freddy's Dead. And the interesting thing about this is that the third issue never did come out, but you can go online and get your hands on the partial script for the third and final issue. So that's why I'm kind of bundling these two reviews together. There's not a lot to talk about with Freddy's Dead, so I'm just going to go ahead and go through. It's a straight adaptation of the movie, so it's not one of those things that ends up having a bunch of extra stuff, but as you can see, it starts exactly the same with John Doe falling out of the airplane, falling into the house then picking up, and you get Witch Freddy, and then you also get the bus crashing into him, and it's all very standard. Now, to give proper credit, this series was written by Andy Mangels, it is drawn by Mike Witherby, and it is inked by Barb Kalberg. So I'm going to show all of those credits right there, so I can give proper credit right there. So Final Nightmare Part 1, and this episode or issue goes all the way up to the point in the story where, of course, it introduces everyone. It introduces John Doe, it introduces Maggie, it introduces Doc, it introduces Tracy, and they go to Springwood. And, of course, the character played by, Seth Green's partner. I'm going to miss his name now. Oh, no. I'm not going to be able to think of his name off the top of my head. It'll come to me throughout the thing. Oh, darn it. Oh, that's going to kill me. Anyway, you guys know who I'm talking about. So that's issue 1. Issue 2, same creative team, and you see it picks up right back at the fair. And it is such a faithful adaptation, which is why I don't mind going through it with you, that you can see they even modeled the Tom Arnold and Roseanne character after Tom Arnold and Roseanne. So it's not even worth not... Is that Donald Trump right there? Good Lord. No. Okay, he's too old, but... similar. And they even have the chalk drawing of Freddy here, so it's a very faithful adaptation. It's not really... If you've seen Freddy's Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Cody Leach's favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, then you know what happens. Here we see him versus Carlos dropping all the pins, making all the noise, hurting his head, and then you see that some of the deaths are done a little bit different, where Freddy doesn't do a bunch of circles, he just scrapes across one time and explodes poor Carlos's head. So yes, it is a straight adaptation, and this issue ends at the point, let's see, he starts playing the game. The game looks a little bit different, as you can see. Looks like he's shooting something. I don't remember him shooting anything in the actual movie. But the actual, the show ends right here after the death of John Doe, when they crack reality and Freddy says it's traveling time and goes into Maggie's brain. So that's where issue 2 ends. And then here's what's interesting about the Freddy's Dead series. So they did 2 separate issues, excuse me, 2 separate versions of episode 3, or issue 3. They did issue number 3 regular, and then they did issue 3D with 3D, what does it say? Freddy Vision, it'll blow your mind. So yes, they did a non-3D version and a 3D version. I went ahead and ordered both. So I'll show you the non-3D stuff so you can see kind of the difference. I mean, it's pretty basic, but it shows, you know, Maggie going on her quest to find out more about Freddy. It leads to the flashback of Freddy as a kid, and then Freddy versus Tracy, beating up her father and turning into Freddy. Doc versus Freddy, and the moment where Freddy starts to cut off his own fingers. They even tried holy water. And then we also see the Dream Demons here. So they do bring the Dream Demons into the comics as well. Obviously, it's part of the movie, so they would, but it matters for the next series, the beginning. So right here we see the flashback to when Fred was a little boy and he bashes the little hamster in class. And it continues on, and we see the origin here where he says, you know, I want them all. And then the gods, the dream bad gods go into him. And now we get the finale here, where it is Maggie versus Freddy in the real world. And it's cool, you know, it's not bad in non-3D. And we get to see all the same beats that happen in the movie, but drawn out instead. So it's not bad, but the coloration gets weird, obviously. And yeah, it ends with, of course, Freddy dying, except we get to see a little bit more body parts when it happens this way. Although you do see it in the other one, but it's weird digital effects. So that's okay. It's not bad. It's a straight adaptation. But the 3D version is really cool, because not only did they, when she goes into 3D, not only does it turn into straight 3D, but the entire issue along the way, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I am mistaken, yeah, it looks like I'm mistaken, but it felt like the entire issue along the way had red and blue highlights that would make the page jump out more in 3D, and it definitely did the whole way. So it's the same issue all the way up until the 3D points, and then it turns entirely 3D. And it is actually really cool in 3D. I don't think there's any way... I wonder if there is a 3D filter that you can turn on. I'll take a look, and if so, I will present it right here. So this is 3D vision if they have it. If not, this is what 3D looks like in the comics, you guys. So it's not bad, but it is more fun when you're looking at it in the 3D glasses, which I always keep a pair of 3D glasses right here on my Friday the 13th Part 3D posters, so I can pull those glasses down and use them whenever a comic like this happens. And just by comparison, that's the explosion compared to the other colored version, and it still looks really cool. Even though it's almost black and white, it's still really, really cool in 3D. So I'm glad I got these. Even though they're basically just a, you know, graphical version of the actual movie. But that leads me to the more interesting of the two series, and that is A Nightmare on Elm Street: The Beginning. Now, this was actually also written by Andy Mangels, and to give proper credit again, let me go ahead and open this bad boy up, because this one is literally an exact sequel to Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. It is a 3-issue sequel to that movie / comic book. No joke. They made a sequel with Maggie, with Doc, with Tracy, all of that. And they do some interesting things, believe it or not. I'm actually very upset that they never actually finished the 3rd issue. And we only got 2 of the 3, but I did get the script for the 3rd. So this one is, to give proper credit, this one, and it starts off with Maggie having a Freddy dream where she ends up, very much like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, ends up with the Freddy glove on. And so she's having those dreams because she was told, it's in your blood, in the end of Nightmare 6. So again, just to give credit here, Andy Mangels is the writer, David and Dan Day are the illustrators, Vicki Williams is the letterer, In Color was the colorist, David Campiti is the editor, and onward. So that is the proper creditation. So this is what the artwork kind of looked like throughout. So it's not great, but it's not bad. It's very heavily shadowed, very kind of stylized. I'm not sure I agree with the portrayal of the Doc here. He's got a bit of a jutted forward jaw, you know. Y'all know what that could look like, and it's not super great. But there's some panels that are more effective than others when there's big emotion being portrayed here. So basically what happens is Maggie is having nightmares about Freddy. She tells Tracy and Doc, and they're like, no, we already defeated him. It's nothing to worry about. And she's like, no, I feel like there is something to worry about. They, of course, don't concern themselves too much with it. But she decides, look, I want to get this to rest. I want to make sure we know everything. I want to make sure he won't come back. So she decides to go back to Springwood, and Tracy decides to accompany her. So they go on a road trip to Springwood. And when they get there, you know, it's pretty much the same. It's a largely abandoned town, except there's still a few adults hanging around and doing their sort of daily living. But as they go, Maggie decides to go and follow a trail and try and just learn as much about Fred Krueger as she possibly can. So the first place she goes is the record store, where she ends up, the library rather, and she's trying to get any records about Fred Krueger that she can find, but it turns out he doesn't have any records, but he does have this book right here. The librarian has this book, which he said was just a scrapbook left randomly by a man named John. And she puts two and two together, although this doesn't make sense because the police named him John Doe. But she realized that it is John Doe's diary. The same John Doe that dies in Freddy's Dead: A New Nightmare, or Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, when he lands on the spiked bed. So there you go. She starts looking through, and he has scrapbooks and scraps in there from, this is intended to be the very first victim of Freddy, Alice. And from 1966 or something like that. And what ends up happening is, whenever she looks and discovers a little bit more about Freddy's past, she ends up having full-on visions, Maggie does. Tracy sees that she's having visions, but she can't see the visions. So Tracy is kind of just along for the ride when this happens. So the first time Freddy is luring Alice, his first victim, into his truck, and Maggie sees it, and Maggie tries to stop it, and she ends up pulling the ribbon of the little girl through as Tracy sees, oh no, this is actually real. And so they're needing to investigate further, and every new place that they go in the town, they trigger a new memory for Maggie to go through. Starting here, all the way back when she goes back to her house, she sees this memory of little Fred and the Alice Cooper version of Fred Krueger's father, the same one from the movie. And so it goes through, and what's interesting about this book is it really starts to delve a little bit further into the history of Fred Krueger as it was portrayed in part 6. For instance, the moment when you finally see Fred fight back against his father, portrayed by Alice Cooper. My cats are fighting. Sorry about the dingy bell noises. But when that happens, you see that he's actually visited immediately after slashing his father to pieces. He's immediately visited by those dream demons, saying that, oh, you're a man that wants power. We like you. So there was a earlier exposure to them than the first time we saw them in Freddy's Dead, when they first show up when he's burning alive. It shows that they were actually around him, influencing him even beforehand. And so they decide to, they see him drag a body, his father's body, into a hidden room. So they go into this hidden room, and it triggers yet another memory as she decides to start digging. And when they, well, doesn't trigger a memory just yet, but they start digging, they find the body of Alice Cooper, and it turns into this ghoulish thing that then that starts causing a chaos in the house. It starts rumbling, and the girls get out just in time for the house to completely collapse at the end of the issue. And forgive me if you feel like I'm ruining this, but quite honestly, these books, I mean, you can spend the money if you want, but they're not collected anywhere. So I'm just giving you the story so you don't have to worry about it if you don't want to. But if you're a big Nightmare fan like me, you're going to want to get your hands on this, because it is literally a direct sequel, and I had no idea until I seeked it out not too long ago. So that gets us to issue number 2. Issue number 2, same creative team. So in this issue, they are continuing on, and Tracy is still trying to help out. There's a sort of recap, and it shows that Maggie is still on the hunt and still triggering memories. And so what she ends up, this one's called Burnt Offerings. The first memory that she triggers at the municipal building, the jailhouse, is the trial of Fred Krueger. And so the whole trial plays out over the course of a few pages here. More than a few pages. There's about 6 pages of the trial where you say they put him in here, and the lawyers are trying desperately to convict him, But the judge unfortunately sees that there is a discrepancy in the way the evidence was handled, and so she has to literally let him go. And you see the whole mob of parents get upset when they deliver the verdict. And so it ends up turning into this big thing. The two cops that were the ones that bumbled the case go out and they run across the actual mob of parents, and they decide to sort of try and quell the mob. It does not work out very well. But what's interesting about this, again, anyone that knows Freddy lore, here's what's cool about this. So the cops that are involved, one of them is Nancy's father. So one of the cops is Mr. Thompson. I'm not sure if he's Detective Thompson at this point or just Officer Thompson, but he is one of the cops that botched the thing, and so he's here to try and quell everything. Or he might be the sergeant of the ones that botched the thing, but he shows up in this confrontation. And you also see a few parents from the future, or from past. So you see, you actually see Kristen's parents, her fancy mother that I can't remember the actress that played her, but she is represented in this. Her and her husband, she's like, we need to go take care of this so our Kristen is safe. And then there's also the parents of the Kincaid family. So Kincaid from part 4 and part 3, his parents are here as well. So it's really interesting how they tie it into the series proper. And I'm sure there's even more ties that I didn't fully pick up on. But they have no choice but to let Fred Krueger go. And when they do, the parents go and they actually confront Krueger at his place. But here's what's interesting. In part 6, they made it seem like all they did was light Molotov cocktails and throw them into Freddy Krueger's shack or house and burn him alive. But in this, they actually go into the house and they start beating the crap out of him. They use bats, they stab him, and they just keep whooping on him. And it actually all starts with right here. This is Nancy's father pistol whipping Freddy to start off. So he starts it, and then all of the parents come in and start whooping his ass. And then they come and drench him with gasoline all over him, not just on the shack. And then they set the flame. They all go outside and they set the blaze. And then the Dream Demons come and the scene from part 6 plays out. And so, you know, he burns alive. But here's what's interesting. While he burns alive, while Maggie is there in her vision, she actually starts to catch fire. And then in the reality where Tracy sees her, you see these light beams start to come out of her, and she starts to turn and twist like Freddy at the end of part 3 when the holy water is getting sprinkled on him. All these beams of light start appearing on Maggie, and essentially what happens is she straight up disappears. And when Tracy pulls the blanket away, all you see is Freddy's hat. And then she's at the boiler room, or actually the power plant. This is actually meant to take place at the power plant at the end of part 2. So this is referencing the power plant at the end of part 2, saying at one point that Freddy actually bought the power plant and was the owner before he died. So that leads us to the third issue, which never actually came to be. So all that I actually was able to find was the script that was available, which is, frankly, it is the first, just to give you a perfect example, or a straight up. So it has 7 pages full with description and dialogue. And then there's 7 more pages of just description, no dialogue. And then there's one final page, the last page of the issue, which actually had description and dialogue. So what I'm going to do is actually just kind of read you my notes and tell you how things happened rather than going through the script and showing you script pages. So I have it written down right here, but it was kind of an interesting way to end the series. So it intros on a prehistoric creature dying violently in front of its kids. Don't know why, but there was some tying in dialogue that I guess made sense. It didn't really hit with me without seeing it, but whatever. So it says that Maggie wakes up in a dark, womb-like sack that is with a mutated claw hand on her right hand. Not her actual hand, but a Freddy claw on it instead. Freddy helps her out of the sack and she asks how he's back. And she says, or he tells her because she recreated him. And now he's there to train her and the others to take his place. Not much to go on there, but that's what we find out. In the real world, Tracy sits outside the power plant from part 2 and grabs Maggie's gun and John Doe's scrapbook before heading inside. Once inside, she hears noises until finally all the dead Elm Street kids emerge from the steam. So there's a bunch of dead Elm Street kids that emerge from steam, emerging from the power plant, obviously, and they're all dressed in white. And then it cuts to Maggie, who swipes at Freddy with her claw, but he stops it, and he it's one of these. She swipes and he stops it, and the glove then transfers from her hand to his hand. Then they head through the aliens-like opening. So Mangles apparently describes the hellscape as a sort of, really evil underworld that sort of has structures similar to the aliens structures from James Cameron's movie. So that's what he keeps referencing here. They head through the aliens-like opening in the wall, emerging into the dream world equivalent of hell. So that is up through page 7. From here, it is just action, no dialogue for the next 7 pages. Tracy interacts with little Alice, who is Freddy's first kill. She's one of the Elm Street kids that emerged from the mist. Then the kids part, allowing Tracy passage forward with some following along behind her. As Freddy and Maggie walk through hell, they see a queen alien-like dream demon that has other dream demons suckling at her teats, including one of the 3 dream demons that Freddy sees all the time. Maggie sees a child in a pool having a nightmare, so she goes and brushes his hair and soothes him. But when she turns around, she sees Freddy with all 3 of those same dream demons standing behind him, their full forms revealed, the script says. So apparently they wouldn't just be the floating heads with tails that we saw in the movie, but they were going to have their full bodies revealed in this shot. I was really intrigued by that. So once Freddy advances on her, she stops him. He goes towards her and he swipes his glove down. This time she stops him and she uses her other arm and turns it into a Terminator 2-like spike. It says it turns into a flesh-like spike, and she raises it to strike. And that's the end of page 14. The next page I see is page 21. Those 7 pages are nowhere to be found online. So I don't know what happens from that point with Tracy, from that point with Maggie. I don't know what happens between that and the last page. So now we'll talk about the last page. In any town, USA, a 9-year-old boy is abused by his mom and shoved into a broom closet. So it's a Harry Potter situation, shoved into a broom closet. When he's in there in the dark, suddenly the figure of Freddy emerges from the darkness behind him. However, he doesn't look just like our Freddy. He's got Freddy's face, but he's got a full dream demon body now. So he has evolved into a full dream demon at this point. So, basically that's all it says. He starts to whisper into the little boy's ear rather than killing him. He whispers into the boy's ear, telling him how bad his parents are, and the corruption begins anew. And the last words from the author say, the cycle continues. So now I'm guessing that Freddy becomes a disturbing, influential force, turning kids evil from that point on, using his new Dream Demon status. So it is a very interesting idea. There are some things that I think are cool, but overall it's just kind of a lackluster story, especially without a 3rd issue to actually look at. But I wanted to cover it for you guys. This is indeed the first part of the Freddy reviews for the comic books. I think there's going to be a total of 4 Freddy comic book reviews. So this was the first one. Fuego and I are going to review the 6-issue Nightmares on Elm Street comic book series. That one is actually a sequel to part 3 and part 5. So that is a really interesting, that was a 6-issue series by Innovation also. And then there were a few issues done by Avatar Press in the early 2000s, written by Brian Pulido. And then Freddy went over to Wildstorm, which was a subsect of DC Comics, and they did 8 issues over there. So I will have all 4 of those reviews coming out in the next 4 weeks. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird. If you enjoyed the video, click that like button and subscribe if you don't want to miss the future Freddy's comic book reviews coming at you. And while you're here, you guys, the link is in the description box. If you didn't know and you happen to stumble across this video, we're making a sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It is called Dylan's New Nightmare, and we are currently raising funds for the campaign. The Indiegogo link is in the description box down below. We have things available from Blu-rays to VHSs to signed pictures from Miko Hughes, who is reprising his role as Dylan Porter. All kinds of good stuff at the Indiegogo. Click that link in the description box down below if you want to help make the next Freddy movie that is going to be unofficially in canon. I do have to say this is a not-for-profit film, but it is a film made by the fans for the fans, and we are bringing Freddy back in a big, bad way. Thanks very much, and remember, stay scared!